Hey there, woman beings. Just a quick announcement before the start of our episode. This holiday season, we are launching our very first charitable initiative, which is something we've actually been dreaming about for a long time. We've talked about the opportunity to give and empower and make the world a better place since before actually the conception of this podcast even existed. So this is super exciting that we have the opportunity to do this. Kellyanne is going to tell you all about it.
Yes, so we are partnering with a company called Ruby Cup, which is an incredible company that was founded in 2012. And they are the very first menstrual cup company to have a built-in buy one, gift one program. So no matter what you buy from them, you are always donating a menstrual cup to a woman in period poverty or in need in an impoverished nation or something of that sort, which is amazing because Ruby Cup's mission is to end period poverty. So we're very excited to partner with them.
Yes, that mission is also our mission. We love the way that Ruby Cup is trying to empower women. If you don't know, women in period poverty means that they wind up missing out on things like an education or getting to have a real steady job or all sorts of things because they don't have a way to manage their period. And that is a silly obstacle, we think. So we are partnering with Ruby Cup to match every donation that is made through our affiliate link until the end of the year up to $2,500. And so that means that by the end of the year, we will have donated, along with you, up to $5,000 worth of menstrual products, which is just incredible. That means that around 300 women will gain access to menstrual cup who didn't have access before. And that's going to change women's lives. And we are going to have links for that in our bios, in our stories, in our everywhere. You can find it to partner with us. You can either buy yourself a menstrual cup or buy a menstrual cup for someone you love. And your menstrual cup purchase will give an automatic donation from Ruby Cup and then also an automatic donation from us if you're using our affiliate link. If you do not menstruate or have no need for a menstrual cup, then you can also just donate a cup and not purchase one. And that will still be a match donation on our end. So you donating one cup is like donating 2 cups because we are giving all the cups away.
It's a lot of menstrual cups. And then final thing to just make sure you guys understand is that we're making absolutely no money from this. This is 100% going to support women in need. So with that being said, happy donating, happy menstruating, and happy holidays.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, woman beings. This is Woman Being Podcast. I'm here with Emma.
Hello there.
And Kellyanne.
Hello and good morning.
And I am Kelly, your host today. And today we're talking about the creative grind. And as you all know, we are all creatives because we release this podcast and we talk about things that are creative and we do a creative thing. But there's more to ourselves than just podcasting and talking about angry feminist rants. We have other...
What?
Angry.
There's more.
There's more to us there. And there's also just like a grind that comes with like producing something for the world. And so we wanted to talk about that process and kind of how we get stuff done. And I don't know, we have a lot of different topics that kind of surround this. So if you like this episode, it could be a series. You just have to let us know on our Instagram. If you follow us, it's at Woman Being Podcast. Or, we are on TikTok and YouTube and other places.
Yeah, message us on all of them, all at once.
Yeah.
Just blast us with all your input.
We want to hear from you. And we've actually released several podcasts this season that are listener recommended. So if you guys have specific things you want to hear about or talk about, DM us. Anyways, I'm getting long-winded. Let's dive in. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
So, Woman Being Podcast, this lovely project, we call it a project for so long that we've produced. I think this really started, the core of it started because of COVID. Because we kind of all gathered together.
Yeah.
We were like in each other's, what's it called? Like
It was
The
our
bubble.
three
bubble, yeah.
household,
We were a 3-household
minimum or
bubble.
maximum or whatever.
Yeah. And so it started meeting 6 feet apart in like
Lawn
my
chairs.
driveway, drinking margaritas and like trying not to like get too close to each other.
Yeah.
But then evolved once kind of things started to calm down. We sort of like bubbled together and we were having some great conversations about all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was honestly some of my favorite time. Like, everything quieted down in the world. I mean, even though it was like really traumatic and really hard, everything kind of quieted down, and like we would just spend time together. Like after work, we would get together at one of our houses, stay up late, and talk about, all of the questions we have about politics and religion and morals, and as women, how do we navigate in today's world, especially, in the deconstruction journey.
And so in the midst of these conversations, Kelly had an amazing idea, which was, hey,
Well, Kellyanne did.
Kellyanne. I meant Kellyanne. I said Kelly. She was like, let's start a podcast. And we were like, okay, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic and everyone's starting a podcast right now. Like,
Why not us?
It's true.
And we spent I think this process part is important, like the from conception to like the first release of our first podcast, because we didn't just like decide we were going to do something and then like casually throw something out into the world. Like we actually spent an entire summer meeting weekly to plan episodes, to plan our social strategy.
We came up with sort of like a vision, like sort of our like ethos. What do we stand behind? We built a website.
Emma built a
built a
website.
We built a studio.
We designed a logo.
There was a lot.
Yeah, branding. Like we thought about brand. We had a Pinterest board.
Yeah.
We did.
We had we wrote copy about our identity and who we were going to be and all that stuff.
Did a photo shoot.
We did a photo shoot. So like this was like a very in-depth process for us. It was by no means like a haphazard decision. I mean, maybe it's haphazard at the beginning, but like we took it very seriously and like made something happen.
Yeah. We poured a lot of love, lots of love and lots of time into the prep, which I think is important because statistically most podcasts don't make it to the 10th episode. And if you make it past the 10th episode, which we've now done 5 times, like it's more likely to quote unquote succeed, meaning you will stick with it as a host. And so that was really cool. We really put a lot of intention into our topics and the guests we reached out to, and it was really special and still is.
It's still going.
I think the guest thing you bring up, that to me was one of the scariest pieces of it, and still is to me one of the scariest pieces of what we do, is like reaching out to people and being like, hey, do you want to come on our tiny podcast that no one's ever heard of? And I remember just being so shocked, but like not shocked, but shocked.
Yeah.
That people would just say yes.
Give up their Saturday morning to hang out with us in our hot little studio room.
And I'm still continuously shocked when people say yes. Like as we have like sought out like bigger names and things like that, like people are like, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised. So yeah, stay tuned for some of those. Forthcoming. But yeah, like in that, woman being is like a creative outlet for all of us. It's also like a lot of work. A lot of it feels creative, but a lot of it feels like work. And I think that's a good thing because there's like a balance. I think any creative has to kind of recognize that like if you truly want to go after what you want, there's like a lot of work behind doing that. It doesn't just sort of blossom out of like...
Yeah, I think that like the creative like workforce is romanticized a lot.
Absolutely.
In the idea of like, oh, you just like wake up and then you're hit with inspiration and then you like just beautiful things pour out of your every orifice. And like that is like being a creative person. But actually like there's so much planning. There's so much admin, like so much of just organizing, especially when it's something that's independent like we are. On Woman Being, like it's we have to do every role. So we are the like office managers and the finance people for our $40 we made in ad revenue.
But like we invest some of our
and
own
we
money
are-
into it as
yeah.
well. So like we're the
Yeah.
investors, we're also the managers.
Yes,
And
we are the bosses and the
directors.
employees and everything. So, and I think a lot of creative fields are like that because a lot of people go into a creative field like independently, whether that's like freelance or starting your own company or whatever. Like it's a lot of grinding, which I think is not the typical inclination of people that you would characterize as creatives.
Yeah.
yeah, like it's actually kind of amazing to me that the people who end up being really successful like are able to take their like creative right-brained mind and like discipline themselves enough to like make stuff happen.
Yeah.
Because there's really like so many mornings when I don't want to get up and come to the studio and record for 8 hours. But like once we do, like it's really fulfilling and rewarding, and I'm so thankful that we put ourselves out there to make that happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, the grind is truly a grind.
Yeah.
Creativity it costs something for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, how's the podcast? How are you? How is the podcast going? Like, all the things. And I'm just like, the podcast is great. I'm exhausted. It is my other job that pays me nothing, but I love it and I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I think the tension of those two things, like I'm exhausted and this pays me nothing, but I love it and I'm really happy. Like there is a tension that comes with that. And yeah, that's something I think people don't think about.
Yeah, and I mean, this for sure is like one piece of it. Like, I don't think any of us grew up like dreaming that we were going to be podcasters one day. Like, you know,
Did podcasts even exist?
it didn't
definitely
exist.
didn't.
Like, but like we weren't even dreaming necessarily of becoming radio hosts or whatever. But I think like we did dream of influencing people. We dreamed of having an impact on women and empowering women and things like that. And this felt like a great tool to make that happen. But it obviously wasn't necessarily like I shouldn't say obviously, it wasn't our first thought when it came to like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. This is who I want to become. And my question is like, beyond woman being, like, each of us have our own creative pursuits that we don't necessarily talk about here. But I would love for you guys to share like some of the other things that you're working on, would love to work on, would love to be someday.
Well, I've always kind of been creative. I was a ballerina from the time I was 6. And that was actually my career path part of my career path. I also did the music and the acting and, you know, you do all the things in that world and the musical theater. And it was really fun. But then I quit all of that to go to a ministry school. And that was great too. So this is my first like really intensive creative endeavor since that life. And I think I've wanted something to pour my time into and my heart into since then. But on the side, I am actually a writer. I'm working on a book currently. I have ideas for a few like short stories and like possibly screenplays. I've flirted with the idea of wanting to be in the film industry, but who knows, like really, because it's not something I can actively go after at this point in my life. But something that I can cultivate and work on is my writing. And so I decided to have a summer of writing. And I bought about 10 writer's books, screenplay books, you name it, I probably bought it. And started just really going to school and teaching myself as much as I can. And so I'm now putting those things more into practice so that I can, you know, be an educated creative in my hopefully one day field. So it's kind of interesting, the process of stewarding a dream, right? And then I'm also like flirting with the idea and interest of being in comedy. So that is something that is newer versus like writing is something I've gone after for about 6 years now.
One day she'll show us her stand-up set.
One
We've
day.
been begging and begging.
I love good white girl jokes.
I mean,
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
For me, I mean, if you women beings don't already know, I'm a video editor by trade, so that's already like a fairly creative field. I like make videos every day, besides making these videos for you guys. Wink. And yeah, that's actually something I didn't think that I would be necessarily. Like I was always interested in like photography and in video, and I have a degree in photography, but I was very close to getting a degree in video instead, and sort of just through multiple circumstances have landed in a video editing role, which is something that, speaking of like creatives not being as like organizational admin oriented, that's actually part of why I took a job as a video editor, was because I wanted to really intentionally cultivate that like organizational side, because I've always been so much more focused on just the creative side. So even in like photography school, there's so much where like working with like a camera as your medium is, and then a computer is, it's a very technical like art, as opposed to like an art like painting or writing or sculpting or whatever. Like you need to know a lot of technical like tech things, and we even had to learn like science because we like developed our own film and stuff. So doing that, I always struggled on that technical side and would regularly forget all the technical things that I was taught in school, and then have to like have my peers help me because I was focused on like the creative vision, like what am I trying to communicate, what is the art here, and would regularly make stupid mistakes with camera settings because I just like, my brain does not cling to that type of thing. So doing video editing, I feel like, has been really beneficial to me in that, because you have to be very organized. You have to be very detail oriented. And you can't just be like willy-nilly with like the creative vision. And so that's been super beneficial to me. Besides video editing, another thing that I try to like bring into creative practice as more of like a fun thing, because obviously video editing is my full-time job and I do that all day. I also like to songwrite, and I've written a bunch of songs, and the world has not heard a lot of them, but it's like a good creative outlet for me, songwriting or writing poetry. And then also doing independent like photography projects. I'm currently slowly getting through editing a photography series that I did while in quarantine, about like quarantine life and what that looked like. And very slowly getting through that. So things like that, like finding ways to be creative on the outside, are also really helpful. But the point is, in terms of what I would want to do eventually with that, I think that for me, I feel comfortable going into multiple sort of creative avenues. I feel like this podcast has been a huge creative outlet, and obviously all the other things that I said are also creative outlets for me. But I feel like eventually I would love to be in some sort of role where I'm creative directing. Whether that's for a company or a brand, or if that looks like casting vision for different creative projects. I really love the idea of getting to work in like documentaries and telling like real life stories, creating advocacy around things and like awareness around things, I think is super important and is something that's really valuable that we can do with a camera. And so that's sort of like the far off like goal, but it's pretty abstract for me still, because I feel like there's a lot of avenues that I could see myself going down. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
I think we're all waiting and seeing.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, right? About being young creatives. It's like I could go in so many directions. I love it all. And like, but also like, I feel like we're all pretty realistic with ourselves
Totally,
around
unfortunately.
like where we are at. And it's like, hey, like, I understand I've only been writing for 6 years and I'm working on a book. The book could be absolute shit. Like, that's the reality, and like knowing capacity, but also being a dreamer. And it's like, oh, how do you push yourself, but don't set too high of an expectation? And then also there's a fear of like, oh my gosh, I don't want people to think that like I think I'm this amazing, like untrained, like creative that's going to blow everything up, Like, I think that's like a fear of mine, at least. Anyway, it's hard to be a young creative in today's society.
Yeah, I sometimes it's crushing how much like I want to do, and like the reality that I am one person with one life, and I cannot be everything. I think my biggest things outside of the podcast that are creative, similar to Emma, I do work in a creative field. I'm a video producer, which positionally is very logistical. So I'm doing a lot of, I call it party planning. Like, there's an event and I have to make sure all of the guests are invited and that they know where to park and they're fed and the entertainment arrives on time and the party doesn't go too long so that the police don't come, and I have the proper permits, etc. But I am in really close proximity to like creative writing and vision and stuff. And so, and I would love to move into the direction of directing and writing more. But outside of just my job, which is just like ads based, like I work for a company that needs ads and ad content and video content to sell its product. So outside of that, I would love to write and direct narrative film and cinematic TV series and stuff like that. So that would be the big dream. A more realistic dream would be being able to work in that field on some level, whether that's like as a producer or coordinator or something on that sphere. But I have a screenplay that I'm working on. It's kind of been on pause lately, which we'll get into. I've written a couple short films that I have one that's kind of like in the development pre-production process. And it's the hardest thing, I think, for everybody is like there's this beautiful creative mind that we all carry that manifests in different ways, but like finding the time, like how do you guys get home at the end of the day and rather than like binge New Girl for the 5th time, you like sit down and intentionally spend time at your computer writing, editing pictures, writing, making a shot list, like storyboarding, like how do we do that? How do we prioritize our creativity? Which is honestly, to me, like that's our purpose in life. Like these creative pursuits, the things that come out of our heart, like that's what we were made to do. We're not necessarily made to like do 7 loads of laundry a day. It's just what we have to do. So how do you guys prioritize your creativity in your busy lives? Because I know you have them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Because
We're all wondering.
that is the great question, right? How do you prioritize? How do you plan out your day? I think being really realistic about where you are at as a person is very important. I mean, for the past 4 years, I've had a really serious mental health journey. Like that's been my reality. And so that has meant a lot of things get set to the side because what I need to focus on is taking care of myself, physically and mentally, and making sure that I do things like shower. And so like, I think with the awareness of where you're at in your life, you have to adjust those things. But more recently, I'm feeling great. Like, I feel like life is my bitch right now. Like, and so that changes. So right now I have space for roughly 5 things. It is my job, which actually requires a huge chunk of my time, my mental and physical health, the podcast, my husband, and like my creative projects, my writing. Not in that order, by the way. And so that has meant a few things for me. Like now when I get home from work on specific days, I have cleared my table because my table normally is a hot mess. I've cleared it and made it beautiful. It's got cute like pumpkins and like flowers on it. And I sit down at my laptop and I do either woman being things or writing things when I get home from work instead of, I even stay in my work clothes intentionally so that I can stay in that task-oriented mindset. And I try to do things for at least an hour. And then if it keeps going, it keeps going. But that is my commitment to myself, because it's really easy to be like, I'm exhausted. I need to change. I need to veg out on the couch. And sometimes you do need those things, right? Like that, your rules can't be like set in stone forever because you're a person, you're not a robot. And so that's been what's working for me recently. Something else that I found the past we're in November. So the first 3 weeks of October felt so chaotic to me. For some reason, like I was just like out all the time, doing all the things. And I felt like, hey, actually, I'm not centered and like keeping in with my priorities. And so that has caused me to make some changes. Like now 3 days a week, I am working out, whether I feel like it or not. And that is what, helps me focus in on the more creative things. Sometimes when your body's exhausted, your mind is sharp in a completely different way. And so for me, that's kind of been how I've done my best to navigate it. I'm also really, really blessed, I guess is the way to say it, because my husband is also a writer, and he's a damn good one, actually. And I get to bounce things off of him, and he gets to bounce his things off of me. And we like talk about our stories and the research we've been doing, and that helps a lot. It's helpful to have someone in your home that is willing to be creative with you, because you can feed off of each other's energies. But yeah, that's kind of roughly how I prioritize. It's not a perfect system. I don't think it ever is, but it works right now.
I feel like creativity is often like doing the laundry or going out on a run or making dinner. Like, it's never something I want to do. Like, the creative things are the things I want to do, but like the actual like work that goes into them, and it's never something I want to do, but when I do them, I feel so much better. Like, I feel better after I've made my bed and like vacuumed the floor.
Yeah.
I feel better after I've eaten like a homemade meal rather than like picked up Chick-fil-A. But it's that like reminding myself at the I guess largeness of the task.
Yeah.
That the task itself actually is good for me and actually makes me happy. That like pushes me through to getting stuff done.
Yeah.
To be fair, I want to qualify with that with there's a lot of times where I look at the mountain and I say, nah.
Not today, mountain.
Not today. But I do think it's like those little intentional choices to be like, you know what? I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write for an hour, half an hour. I'm going to reach out to that person and ask them if they'll like, run camera for my thing. And getting over those humps, you actually like feel happier.
Yeah.
So
I agree. It's true. And like, I actually forgot how good it is to physically feel tired. Like, not mentally, like your body. Because then you can like focus in on those more creative tasks. And for me, that's been like my revelation the past 2 weeks.
So that's with like exercising.
Yeah, with like exercising. Which, I mean, my body used to always be tired. And so I had so much more brain juice to go into writing or whatever. And now that's been really liberating. That is now my quote unquote mountain that I choose to climb at least 3 days a week.
But yeah, like you and we went on a run the other day, and I really, really did not want to go on a run. I had like the beginnings of a headache. I was like, this does not sound fun at all. But I went and I felt so energized, and I had so much energy throughout the rest of the night to get stuff done. And so yeah, not that working out and creativity are like in the same, but I think there's kind of that same mental hump that you have to kind of get over to like sit down and write at your laptop.
Yeah. I mean, to be totally transparent, I'm currently in a season of not doing things like that because one of the things that I find makes it difficult being in a creative field is that at least I feel like it's difficult to turn down any sort of opportunity because it could potentially lead to more opportunities.
Yeah.
And so I'm in like a season of transition right now, and I feel like I need to take hold of every creative opportunity that I have in order to set myself up for success. But that means I don't have time to exercise. I haven't been to the gym in like a month and a half at least. I don't have time to like make as much food as I would like to make or like things like that. Like I can't prioritize those things right now.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I think actually has helped me to realize how much of a privilege it actually is to be able to be creative and to even be able to have like personal creative projects and things like that. That is a huge privilege because that means you have your other needs met already. Like if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you need to have basic needs before you can delve into like headier realms and be able to like pursue philosophy or deep thinking or creative thinking. Like you need to have shelter, you need to have like food, you need to have like basic things. And so I want to acknowledge that it's definitely a privilege to be able to be creative, and like people who are even more needy than us, like there's no way for them to even have the capacity for that because you're focused on basic needs. And I feel like right now it's sort of like, well, one of the things that like motivates me to like go home after work and be creative is that like people are relying on me to do it. So whether it's the podcast, like I'm like, I have to do this because people are relying on me to do it. Or if it's freelance work, it's like, I have to do this. Like it doesn't matter if I don't get as much sleep, I have to. And so I think that actually that's one of the things that's super helpful, even if you're doing like personal projects, is to have people who are holding you accountable for it. So like talking about the projects you're doing makes you do them.
Yeah.
It's true.
And so that's one of the reasons why I think like woman being has been so like we've been able to be so like consistent with it, is because we are all like relying on one another to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if this was like an independent project that just one of us did, I mean,
it'd be gone by now.
it
There's
would have
no
fizzled
way.
out.
Woman
Probably.
being would not exist
Yeah.
if I did not feel guilty about getting stuff done for you guys.
I'm
It's
not
true.
saying guilt.
Oh,
I just-
no. That's how I just 100% operate. Like,
Okay, well, I'm
Obligation
not
to get
saying
stuff done.
guilt. I'm saying like accountability, and so that might manifest as guilt for you, but the thing is like that's what it comes down to when it comes to prioritizing creativity for me right now, and I think it is super helpful to like set aside time to be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I think also like not allowing myself to get distracted is helpful. So like literally saying like, okay, I'm not going to sit on the couch. I'm not going to like just watch one episode of How I Met Your Mother. Like
yeah, totally.
I'm going to actually sit at this table and I'm going to put my headphones on and I'm going to very intentionally set aside this time to do this. And then I think, like you guys are saying, it gets very much so where, like, you're happy that you did it. But I also find, if you guys have seen the movie Soul, in that movie they talk about, like, the zone. Like, you get into the zone, I think they call it, which is essentially where you are doing sort of something creative and you enter, like, another realm mentally. And I definitely find it's hard for me to get started, and I'm definitely a procrastinator. But once I start getting like fully in motion with the creative thing I want to do, I can go for hours because I'm in the zone.
That flow state.
Yeah. So that's super helpful, is remembering like, okay, if I just start, I will be able to do it, and you will be able to delve into that zone and then like get everything done. But yeah, I think that maybe this is a little bit of a different perspective. for me right now, like creative pursuits are necessity over like fun right now.
Totally. And that's true though. Like sometimes being creative for the sake of being creative is not fun. And also like I really resonated with what you said like towards the beginning of like I have to take this opportunity. Like there is that almost like pressure sometimes of like, well, if I pass this up, this might not come again, or someone else might get that opportunity or whatever. And it's like for myself and my art, I actually need to push into that, even if it means losing sleep or not going to the gym or whatever. Like that is a really hard balance.
Well, and I think that's a very real a piece of it is that like sometimes creativity is not balance. Actually, most of the time it's not balance. It's like imbalance. Like we live an imbalanced life working full-time jobs and doing a part-time job of the podcast. Like we're spending weekends, evenings, like doing this pursuit beyond our like normal 40-hour work week. And that is an imbalance in life, right? Like it is exhausting. We're like choosing to not do certain social pursuits. We're choosing to not do like I can't sustain like a 5-day-a-week exercise cycle like my husband does. Well, he's like 7 days a week, honestly. Like, but I think that's kind of necessary. You kind of have to be out of balance. You have to choose. Like, these are the priorities in my life. Kelly, you've talked about this. Like, if you're gonna have it all, on quote unquote, like you have to have the things that you want and that like are fulfilling. You can't have everything because there's just not enough time or space in this life.
Yeah. I mean, it's just choosing what is important right now. Like what is the priority right now? Because I think the term balance is sort of annoying to me because it's this idea that everything should be in the same amount, but that doesn't make sense. Like I don't sleep the same amount of time that I'm awake. I don't like eat the same amount of time that I'm not eating. Like those things would be ridiculous to be like in balance. Like I think that people a lot of times start to like equate balance with like maybe equilibrium. And at the end of the day, it's what feels like healthy and fulfilling to you. That's what it is. And that doesn't mean that you have to follow like a prescription of what somebody else does. And I think we fall into that with the idea of balance is the idea that like, well, it needs to look like this because it looks like this for these people. And I've been told that this is what a balanced life is. But is it like, what's the point in reaching like this quote unquote balanced life if it's not fulfilling?
Yeah. That's good. Because also, like, balance looks different on everyone, right? Like, everyone's life is different. Everyone's needs are different. My needs for the past 4 years have been very different to what my needs are feeling like now. And I think that's a great thing to take inventory of, you know? Like, where is the tightrope of life swinging and how are you moving to adjust with it?
But yeah, that doesn't necessarily deny the existence of the obstacles that we face to get those things done, right? Like there's many days that I do not win the battle of get out of bed and like get ready for work on time.
Totally.
And that's just an example. Obviously, like sitting down to write on a laptop or like start storyboarding or whatever the creative pursuit may be. You know, it's all kind of the same piece. But do you find that there are obstacles specific to women that like have impeded or made your journey to creativity harder?
I mean, I would say so. Like I mentioned earlier, like if I were to write horror, like for some reason, it feels like writing horror is not feminine. Like, but poetry is. But like a lot of the greats in poetry are men. And so that's a weird balance to be like, feeling internally like I can or can't write something. Or like there are topics that you shouldn't include in a piece because you're not a man or whatever. That is an interesting balance. And obviously I'm not I would never hope to write on someone else's behalf, but I can write on my interpretation of their perspective. And I think that's very different. And yeah, I think that's something that is a little shaky. And then particularly in the area we're in, a lot of the amazing creatives and writers happen to be men. And so, wanting to like show up and be present in those rooms or those groups and be like, yeah, let's talk about this, or let's talk about this philosophy around this topic that could inform writing in this way or whatever. And sometimes it's weird to try and like get into the boys club. Yeah, I definitely think that there are different ways that women are affected in the realm of creativity, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, just like with pretty much every field, the biggest examples and the biggest success stories that we see are men, period. End of story. Like in photography, when I was studying in school, most of the photographers we studied were men. And women slowly crept in, but it's male dominated. And it's fascinating because I actually feel like, or if you think about film directors, the biggest directors are men. Like the biggest, highest paid actors are men. Like the writers are men. And it's fascinating because I feel like there's the stereotype that a creative field is actually for women because it's gentler, it's softer, it's like not a hard science, it's not a hard math, it's not as studious, it's not as whatever. But then you still see men being the ones that are the highest lifted up within that. I think it's very similar to like the parallel you see in the church of women actually are the ones that are flooding the churches, that are serving the churches, they're doing all these things in the church, but then it's men that are the ones that are the leaders. It's men that are the ones that are the speakers that canvas the world for the Lord or whatever. And so I think that that's just like a trend in society in general. Is one thing that's really fascinating, if you look into like the history of video editing, it used to be considered a woman's role. Because it was considered sort of insignificant back when they were cutting film, literally scissors and film. And that was what making a cut meant then. They were editing the films together and it was like, oh, that's just like a laborious task. Women sew, so they're good with scissors, so they can cut film. And so women were cutting film. And then as people started to realize like, oh, actually the way that we cut this and the shots we choose has a huge impact on the story that we're telling. And then men started coming into the editorial field. And now a lot of the biggest editors are men. And it's like a man's game. Like, I feel like a minority when I walk into the room and say that I'm a video editor. I feel like I don't fit the mold of what people think a video editor should look like. I feel like other video editors that I see have like a particular vibe about them and are also of the male persuasion. And I'm over here like, I'm a video editor too. And it feels almost like I can't be taken seriously because I don't fit into the same mold as them. Because not only am I of a different gender, but I'm also like not necessarily conforming to the way that they carry themselves as editors. So that's an interesting thing that comes into that. And I think that makes it hard as a woman to feel like you can like trailblaze, you know? It's hard to feel like you're in the minority because you don't have as many examples to look at. And there's not people to like look up to in the same way. And there's more and more now, but it's like there's a few prized examples that you can look to, and then that's it. Whereas men will have like a sea of examples that they can choose from.
Yeah. I think that also bleeds into like resources and teaching materials as well. Like I mentioned earlier, my, best of the best top, writing and screenplay books that I bought over the summer to like go to school, they're all by men. So I actually intentionally went and bought Big Magic. Oh no, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Her name's
Elizabeth Gilbert.
Thank you, Elizabeth Gilbert. And so I'm just about to dive into that, and that's all about the creative process and stewarding creativity, which is very different than something like the War of Art. Like, that is like you get up and you do the grind and you never change no matter what. And I'm like, that's great. That does not accommodate for the fact that I am a person.
I mean, that's a very masculine perspective,
very
right?
masculine. And that's why I was like, yeah, I can suck out a lot of technique and a lot of knowledge and wisdom from these books. But at the end of the day, actually, I want something like Big Magic that can inform me in a little more of that feminine space as well. Because it's like, ooh, I'm different than that. I can't sustain a process doing the exact same thing every single day because guess what? My hormones don't reset every 24 hours and are always the same. And that I think that plays a role as well.
I think like what we're doing right now, 3 women sitting down at a table, deciding to start a podcast together, starting a podcast together. Like this is very, I think, unique in that I think a lot of creative pursuits start with friends. Mm-hmm. A bunch of guys get together. Owen Wilson and I forget who. Wes Anderson?
Yeah. Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Owen
Owen Wilson, Wes Anderson, best buds out of college, like making films together, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they, through their connection, through their, proximity to other people with influence are able to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Whereas women don't necessarily always have that same sort of access to the boys club that you mentioned earlier. There's like that free flow creativity, let's go get a beer and hang kind of thing is really hard, I think, for women to tap into. And I think that honestly is one of the greatest resources when it comes to like getting your creative stuff out there. It's proximity. Like, who are you close to? Who do they know? Who do they know who knows someone? That sort of thing. And I think that to me is the biggest obstacle is like trying to like buddy up with the guys.
Infiltrate the boys club.
Right. Like trying to buddy up and like be a non-threatening but like can hang kind of gal.
Yep.
Who's like, married and not like sexually available but still like wants to like talk about stuff and like dream and like have sort of those ideas and like be like, hey, let's write something together. Let's work on something together. Let's hang out outside of work and do this together. I think that's really, really hard. And I think men typically have that sort of influence, right? They just naturally are going to be connected with people who know people who know people. Women have to know a guy who's willing to kind of let them into that circle. And not that women can know women. It's just the network is so much smaller.
And it's different. It's different. Also, like, even if you are, like, quote-unquote married and sexually unavailable, like, it can still be weird and tense. Like, I actually know of someone very recently that was accused of some very serious things that was like, whoa, I'm sorry, I did not mean any of that. And it's just the gender dynamics themselves can be really hard to navigate.
Yeah. The person I'm writing a screenplay with, like, it was always just a little weird, like a little awkward because we're both married.
But you're both spending time together.
But we're both spending time together and both like really excited and enjoy like talking about things.
Right, and it's a life fulfilling project.
Yeah.
You're like doing the thing.
Right. And like I remember like we're in Christian culture and so people would be like, you guys are like
a little close.
Yeah. And it was like
that is sin, being
like,
close
no,
to someone.
Like, we're not really into each other that way, but, like, I really do care about him. Like, it's how do you tenderly care about someone, but, like, not be interested?
Yeah.
I don't know. Tenderly is probably the wrong word to use.
I mean, I get it. I tenderly care for your husband. I'm going to run a fucking 5K with him for his birthday.
And I tenderly care for you guys, but I'm not sexually interested in you.
No.
You mean a lot to me, and I would never want, so that's what I mean. Yeah, it was awkward.
It's hard.
And it's always like, I want to, like, get in that zone of, like, let's dream and create and whatever. But, like, it's always like, but you're a girl.
Yeah. Like it's your A badge. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I am a woman who is a human and breathing.
But I think, like, when you do creative things together, like, there is, like, an intimacy that is built, right? Like, we have an intimacy doing this, right?
Yeah.
And so it is awkward. Like,
Yeah.
you're married,
For sure.
I'm married.
I mean, I think the creative process is so personal. And so whenever when you're like engaging in a creative pursuit with another person or with a group of people, like you are all entering into one another's like depths, you know?
It's vulnerable.
It is.
Yeah.
It builds
Genuinely.
a lot of trust too, which
Yeah.
brings people very close together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's what makes like even a creative workspace pretty different from like a more typical like corporate work environment just because you are like dreaming together. Even if you're dreaming about an ad that you're making for whatever, like you are still putting in your creative ideas and input in a way that's like I think really like it has an impact on you. And I think that creatives in general tend to be a bit more sensitive and like more feelers. Actually, I think about a TED Talk that I adore from Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love, and Big Magic, where she talks about like harnessing your elusive creative genius. And we were required to listen to this TED Talk in college, but she talks about how like the idea of the creative genius used to be an out-of-body experience. How like back in the time of like the Greeks, they would the creative genius was a being, and it was essentially like your personal creative genius would like give you ideas as a creative, and then slowly, but it was sort of seen as like a separate thing. It was like this creative genius sort of like blesses you with some ideas, and then you are the like conveyor of those ideas to the physical world. And then gradually, as we got into like ideas of like individualism and got into like Renaissance era, and people became much more just individualistic, the creative genius started to become what you called a person instead of an out-of-body thing. And so then all the pressure of the creative genius was put onto the person. And one thing that she talks about is she cites that sort of as a reason why so many creatives are super depressed is because they have all the pressure of this creative genius onto them, and they have all of the weight of that they're bearing. Whereas really, like, if we thought of it as this out-of-body thing, then it takes that pressure off to an extent where it's like, well, my creative genius just wasn't there today. Like, they just weren't. And, like, you stop being the sole source of that. She even talks about this poet that she spoke to who said that she would feel when she was, like, out in the fields. She, like, I think she grew up on a farm somewhere in the South of the United States, and she'd be out in the field and she would feel the rush that a poem was coming upon her. And then she would run like hell to her house so that she could get a pen and paper so that she could put the poem down before it left. And sometimes the poem would rush through her before she could get to paper and it would be gone. And sometimes she would get there in time and it would rush into her and she could write it down. And sometimes the poem would rush through her right as she was getting to the pen and paper, and it would start to leave her and she would grab it and the poem would come out backwards. Like it was like this whole like very like
it's a very poetic way of putting it.
yes, she's a poet, so that's why
Yeah.
But it's this idea that this is actually something that's outside of us, and I think that can be really helpful in the like the tenderness that comes with being a creative. Is this idea that actually this is something that
Ebbs and flows.
it ebbs and flows. I am not capable of constantly being a creative. And I mean, and just like you were saying earlier, Kellyanne, this like very masculine idea of like, well, you just sit down and you do it every day. The end. Like you do it and you write and you write and you write. And sure, there is value to like grinding, to sitting down and doing the thing when you don't feel like it. But I also find when inspiration does hit me, I'm like, okay, I have the choice. Am I going to sit down and do this and like utilize this time of inspiration? Or am I going to like let it pass me by?
Yeah.
And that's like very real for me. Like there's like, you can feel the wave of like, okay, I am inspired in this time. And so I need to utilize it. And when I'm not inspired, sometimes if I do force myself to create, it's not very good.
Yeah, I agree, though. I actually really resonate with that experience of having a rush. It's so weird. Like when I'm fully in the flow and fully inspired, it's almost like everything lifts and like I can't write or type fast enough. It's like I am in it. And if I get out of it, it's never coming back. And yes, I can force it, but then it's not as good. And I think there's a value to both because there's two very mainstream thoughts, right? There's one, you have to always be inspired and in the flow, which is not practical. But then there's always like you sit down and you do the work and you do it every day and you make it happen, which also has value, but also is not practical. I think you actually need both. You need the discipline and the skill, but you also need that like almost like the creative inspiration that flows through you. And essentially, I feel like I become a vessel. Like it's almost like I'm looking down on myself. It's really weird, but when it happens, it's magic.
Inspiration is magic. We all love those times. However, I do think the masculine kind of approach to it with the idea of like sit down every day, there's value to, I don't feel like it and I'm going to do it anyways. Well, honestly, even when inspiration comes, sometimes you still don't feel like it.
Yeah,
That is true.
Sometimes you're like, I'm literally trying to sleep right now. I don't want to get up.
Inspiration comes at inconvenient times sometimes.
But like there is a value in kind of like sitting down, being like, I don't feel inspired right now, but I'm going to like practice a skill. And I'm going to hone in my writing or my photography or whatever, so there are technical benefits to practicing when you're not necessarily like in the throes of like an out of body inspirational moment. Although I love those types of moments, I still do value kind of like, hey, I said I was going to do this and I'm going to commit to myself and to this craft.
I think we're totally saying it needs to be both.
Yeah, it does have to be both. You can't be inspired without having the skill to like steward the inspiration. And you can't build that skill without the discipline to like sit down.
Yeah.
In whatever way is consistent to you and like practice and learn and grow. So yeah, that is good. Do you guys ever feel imposter syndrome?
Literally all the time. Anytime I say I'm a writer, I want to run and hide.
Yeah, I feel like I have experienced imposter syndrome. Currently, the thing that probably I have the most imposter syndrome about is the podcast. I feel like even the other day I was saying something about how much I would love for the podcast to be able to be like an actual job, essentially. How I would love to be able to have the podcast be something that is bringing in income for us so that then we can focus more time on it. Not out of like wanting to make money because we all make money from our own things, but like as a way for us to be able to actually build this. And saying that, I feel like an idiot when I say it. I'm like, I feel like people instantly, the thoughts that come into my head are people are like, oh, you just want to be an influencer or something, or you're just like looking for fame, or you're stupid that you think that this could be successful. Like, what are you guys even doing? That's original. Like all those things like berate me every time that I bring up something like that. And or even talking about like, I want to stay in this location, like in this area of the world because of this podcast. It's like, why would you do that for something that's literally not giving you money? That's not like your job. That's not anything. But it's like, no, to the thought of like saying I'm dedicated to this, even though it is not like quote unquote successful in the like typical capitalistic vision of what those words mean. I feel imposter syndrome instantly with that. And then also like when we ask guests and stuff to come on, we've talked about this so many times, but it's like every time it's like, we're just pretending to be a podcast and like, would you come on our little pretend podcast? Like that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Or like we're wanting to like do big things like with with charity and stuff, hopefully
Stay
in the
tuned,
holiday
stay
season. And the like reaching out to a charity and being like, hey, we want to partner with you. It's like, why the heck would they want to partner with us? You know? So I definitely get those that creep into my mind. And like when I first started as a video editor, I definitely felt that. But now I feel like being a couple years in, I don't feel that as much in that realm. It's more like, okay, I just have to prove myself.
Yeah.
There's something like unequivocally scary about asking someone to like join you, right, in your creative pursuits. Like saying, hey, would you help me with this thing? Like, would you come on as a guest? Would you like support this?
Yeah.
Like, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, leadership is so terrifying because you're essentially like, you're saying, hey, I'm headed in a direction. I think it's a good direction. Will you come with me? Like, will you essentially like put a stake in the game?
Yeah.
And I think that's when I feel imposter syndrome the most is when it's like, I have to like stand in for something that is not yet seen and like believe for it and fight for it enough to help other people believe in it.
Yeah.
Wow. I actually feel the opposite. Like, because we have done 50 episodes, I'm like, we're doing the thing. Whether people listen or not, we're over here doing the thing.
We are doing the thing.
So I'm pretty loud and proud about the podcast, and it's probably really annoying to everyone because anytime they're like, how was your weekend? I'm like, always. It's like, it was great. I worked on the podcast like I do every weekend. And that's like always my answer. And so, yeah, I don't have imposter syndrome about the podcast. I do about every other creative pursuit I have because I don't have the book, because I don't have, fill in the blank. I don't have like tangible proof of my hard work and my creativity versus the podcast. I'm like, I got 50 episodes to show you, bitch. Like, to me, it's different, but it is intimidating for sure to be like, will you give up, 2 hours of your Saturday morning to come chat with us? That's a big ask for some people that are also doing incredible things that are in the creative grind as well. And I hope someday that we are able to turn around and do the same, for the small podcast that's starting out or the small local like radio show or whatever it looks like. I will come to your grand opening gym event to support that female-led business in our small community. Or I will, go to this fall market craft fair thing because I know all of these people are starving artists just like us in a way. So
there's a level of like the more women like agree to support each other, because I think oftentimes like what we're stuck in is a world where there's lots of male characters and there's like one or two female characters that all the women have to fight for, right? Like that's the only space there is. But I think if we continue to change our mindsets and decide, no, we get to create the roles. Like we get to decide who gets to be what. And we get to create all sorts of space for women of all walks of life. And we'll do that by like joining arms and working together and encouraging each other and connecting different women with different women and helping, I think, like just foster like a good community of creatives. I think that's like the key when it comes to like, how do we get over that sort of imposter syndrome thing? It's like, I think we just support each other. Yeah. Like we show up.
I agree.
We say, yes, I'll come to your event.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like with imposter syndrome, I was thinking about this the other day. Kelly and I saw a speaker and they talked about like these amazing things that they do and how they sort of just like plow forward with, it seems like just like perpetual optimism and just like surety that this is going to succeed. Whatever they try to do is going to succeed. And obviously we're coming at those stories that we're hearing from this person like from the other end of it where they've already accomplished these things. But I had the thought, like, this feels so much like this is the white male experience, which it's this idea that, like, so many men, especially men in a position of privilege, which in the United States would be white men, have been told their whole life that, of course, you can do these things. Whereas women, we've been told, maybe you can't. We've been told, actually, you can't do this because you're a woman. We've been told women aren't allowed to do that. Women aren't allowed to hold that position.
There's not a lot of women that make it in that field.
Yeah. And it's this, like, instant sort of doubt that is put onto us. And I think that obviously it's our choice on whether or not we want to bear that. But it can be hard after hearing those messages for so long to then, like, peel back those layers and say, no, I'm actually going to go forward with this in a way that is totally, like, sure of it, that I'm sure that this will happen, that I am confident this guest is going to say yes, that I feel confident saying, yes, we have a podcast and it's going to blow up. Just you wait. Like, you know, like to say that feels so terrifying. And I think that some of that fear that we feel and that, like, imposter syndrome stems back to, like, being told over and over again, no. Like, being told in the church, no.
There's probably not
being
space
told,
for you. Don't expect it. There's nothing, like, do your best, but don't expect anything out of this life, you know?
And so that's one thing which I think at the same time, like, I don't want to sound like we're just complaining about, like, how hard it is and boohoo on us, because I actually think that female stories in the creative field are this hugely, like, untapped well of, like, beauty. And I think that there's so much potential behind the female story. And I think we're starting to see that as these, like, amazing, like, female directors are coming up in film. And as we're seeing, like, female stories come forward, as we're reading books written by women that are beautiful and heart-wrenching and funny, and, like, there's so many women that are rising up, and I think that there's so much potential because these are stories that, sure, don't sound like these male stories, but I think that people want something different, and, like, that people crave the uniqueness that we can bring from the female perspective. And so I think that that's really exciting, that despite the fact that the female voice has been stamped down for millennia, now the female voice is rising up, and we can, like, the world is hungry for it, I hope. So that's my dose of optimism for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what we have hope for, too. I mean, I think, and we're seeing it in Hollywood, in other realms, like, women are stepping into the space, and the Reese Witherspoons of the world are making studios and, like, film companies out of this, where they're like, we're going to make this many female-oriented, like, assets.
Yeah.
And the world is going to see them, and I think that will continue to grow. And so there is a lot of hope, I think, and opportunity there for sure.
Yeah. Y'all just gave me goosebumps. But yeah, I agree, though. Like, there is a lot of hope and optimism. And I mean, yeah, I might not be a white man. I am a white woman. And I choose to show up with big dick energy, you know? And it's like, yeah, you know what?
Maybe big tit energy.
Big tit energy.
That's the new, that's the female version. We show up with big tit energy. Thank you.
You heard it here on Woman Being. But yeah, and I'm like, you know, I can be cautious, or I can go in with the hope that it might happen and the belief that it might happen. And yeah, it might not happen until I'm 80. But who cares, you know, like, and hopefully that does something for the next generation, for my daughters and my daughter's daughters, and they can show up in creative spheres and not have to go through the same grind as me or whatever. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, y'all really gave me goosebumps there. Jeez Louise.
Well, and I think that kind of, like, brings us, you know, circles us back to the beginning, which is just, there are, I'm sure, thousands of people out there that have creative pursuits that they want to go after. We are one of them, or three of them. And, you know, we woman being is something that we are all passionate about, we believe in, we're dreaming for, but like beyond that, like there's still, it feels like so much untapped possibility and opportunity that we're all wanting to go after and seek out. And that creative grind is, it's kind of a bitch. Like getting over that mental block is really hard. Getting like rubbing elbows to get into the boys club is, I don't know. If someone figures it out, let me know. I feel like you just sort of get lucky sometimes. But most importantly, connecting with other women who want to do those things and being like, you know what if we don't need them?
Yeah.
What if we can go after things ourselves and like invite men into the process, not like vie for a spot in their world. So I think, and that is with, I want to say like men have led the way for creativity for so long. They're brilliant. They have amazing ideas. I think like ultimately the most beautiful thing is when men and women come together and create together. And there's like a whole society when we have all races and all genders and all like expressions of sexuality, etc. Like contributing to creative genius. That to me is like when things truly come alive. But in the meantime, I think there's a need for the female story to come out and the Black woman story to come out and the Indigenous story to come out. And that can only come from the people who have experienced it and lived it. So be encouraged because there's like a huge need in this world, I think, for your story.
Yeah.
You are unique. Your unique experience brings something that is not findable anywhere else in the world. So hold on to that and seek to like bring that out and massage that out and steward that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. And that is the true crossroads of magic, right? Where you have everyone contributing to the work. But on the topic of the work, you're probably going to be exhausted.
probably.
Yeah.
You're probably going to hate your life at least a little bit, but you're also going to love it. And I think that's okay. I think there is a dance of unbalance and balance and exhaustion and excitement. And that's just the reality. But also, like, I think all the time, like, no one is ever happy and well-rested and at the peak of their physical fitness. Well, sometimes. But, like, doing anything really, really great, unless you're an athlete. That's different. But, like...
Well, they might not be that happy.
They might not be that happy.
Yeah,
Well,
greatness comes at the expense of all the other things in your life that matter. Right?
Greatness hurts.
Yes.
It doesn't feel good. You are literally putting everything on the line for something to work out. And that's scary, and it requires a lot of bravery, and you're going to be tired, and you're probably not going to have the balance you want, and you're probably, all the things, like, but you can absolutely do it. And if you're in that space and you know you're on the right track, listen to that inner voice, because you're doing it. You are doing the work. You are doing the creative grind. And you, at the end of your life, you are not going to remember all the times you were tired, all the late nights, all of the, I keep saying tired. Clearly I'm tired.
We're all very tired.
All
Please
of the times you didn't get the organic produce, like, or even the nights out that you decided to stay in instead and practice your medium. Like, you aren't going to remember those things. You're going to remember the work that you put in and how proud you are of what you created. And that's what matters. But also go out with your friends sometimes. That's important too.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that helps me a lot in like gaining perspective is realizing now in our like technology age, there's so much time that we spend wasting and realizing like, oh, in the 30 minutes that I watched this episode of whatever, I could spend 30 minutes cleaning, or I could spend 30 minutes editing, or 30 minutes writing, or whatever. Like, I've been pleasantly surprised multiple times at how much I can get done when you start to eliminate those distractions and say like, well, I'm actually not going to pick up my phone and like go on TikTok or Instagram for this amount of time. Like, I'm actually going to sit down and grind this out and work and do these things. And so I think that like it's just a mindset shift of like what your priorities really are. Are your priorities to watch Netflix? Because if they are, like you can do that. But I think similarly, like you're not going to find any sort of like accomplishment or a sense of like fulfillment, except that like you made it through that season of that show, you know? And I think that there's a lot deeper things that we're meant for, and there's times to veg out and whatever, and to allow your mind to rest for sure. But it's taking stock of like, okay, what is my true priority? And then like, how do I make it actually manifest as a priority in my real life? Am I just saying this is a priority, or is this genuinely prioritized? Which I think that's where some of that discipline and that sort of like organizational skill side of the creative process comes in. It's saying, taking stock of your time and recognizing how much you really can get done if you set your mind to it. I think you'll be surprised. I have been.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. This has been great content. Again, might kind of turn into a little bit of a creativity series. Please give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. And if there's any questions you have or specific thoughts or things that we can like touch on when it comes to the creative process, we'd love to continue that. And yeah, thank you again so much for being here, both of you.
Thank you for being here, Cal.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. And thank you, Woman Beings. We want to encourage you to follow us at Woman Being on Instagram. You can also find us on TikTok. Same
Woman
handle.
Being Podcast
Woman
on
Being
TikTok.
Podcast. And
I think. You'll find it.
You're fine.
It's fine.
our podcast, if you're listening, which you are because you're hearing my voice right now, as you know, or maybe aren't aware, but is on all major streaming podcast platforms along with YouTube. You can also find us at womanbeingcommunity.com. No, www.womanbeingcommunity. There's no at.
www.
And so with all that, we're going
Community.
to close. So we'll see you next week, next morning, Tuesday, 8 a.m.
Oh, little Tuesday 8 a.m. plug.
Ooh.
Okay, bye.
Bye.